Yo, what's up, guys? Today we're going to be breaking down my track, Blade Dance, and I wanted to do this as a thank you for the track passing 6,000 plays on Spotify. That's so crazy to me. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all the support, and without further delay, let's get into it. All right, so we've got the project file open here, and just taking a look at our intro section, we have a few things going on, but the main elements that are kind of carrying the track through are going to be the lead and the Reese that I have going on. And all the other elements just kind of like sit underneath it or build out the atmosphere that I have going on here. And I wanted this intro to be very, very big and kind of epic. So yeah, let's give it a look and then I'll break down each individual element.
They say there exists a realm where disorder and mayhem rule over all. There is no light here, only darkness remains. It is prophecy that...
All right, you guys get the point. So yeah, taking a look at this main lead here, let's solo in on this and I'll pop the patch open. But it's super, super simple. It's just two saw waves, each with some unison detune, just being slightly detuned different from each other. And effects-wise, we've got a bunch of serum effects on here. And I kind of approach all of my sound design with post-processing more in mind. I don't try to do everything under the hood of one VST. And instead, I try to kind of sculpt the sound progressively as we go. So yeah, listening to it again with all of the post turned off, this is what it sounds like. Right, and then we'll turn everything back on. You can kind of hear how it gives it much more of a fuller sound and kind of like puts the lead in a place. It sounds like it's in a room essentially with real world characteristics to it. So yeah, that's the lead. The other element kind of pushing the track forward here is going to be our respace. So I love doing Reese's for my intro elements, especially just to like kind of hold down the low end. Reese's, again, super simple, nothing too crazy, just a sawtooth here, another sawtooth here. We're doing some unison detune, and then we are shaving off the highs. So this is what it sounds like. And everything that I'm doing in post here is just kind of saturating and taking out some annoying frequencies here at around 375 hertz. Not much else to it. Reese's are, yeah, super simple. Some of the other elements kind of like building around this foundation, we have this kind of atmospheric drone that goes on throughout the whole intro and even into the build. And that is just a contact library from the Farlight library. It's really, really sick for these kind of like atmospheric pad type textures. And yeah, let's see what else we got. All right, so we got a nice tension pad there. Another one there, and the song it was written in D minor. So for any samples that I'm using, I am retuning those and pitching those down to match. So everything is in key. We've got some like bottle blowy type swells. And then in this kind of like main section of the intro, we have some like different atmospheres that come in to kind of differentiate it from this 8-bar section coming into it. So yeah, we got some impacts to reinforce the downbeats. Some exhaust just to like iron in those kind of like transition points, make everything kind of feel more push-pulley, kind of like a swell is happening between each section. So every 8 bars, you have a point of tension and a point of release. And then, yeah, we have the vocals that come in. This was kind of meant to be a set opener initially when I made this song. So I wanted the vocals to kind of like iron out some Overcast lore a little bit. And yeah, this is what it sounds like just soloed.
They say there exists a realm where disorder and mayhem rule over all. There is no light here, only darkness remains.
For this vocal, I actually just used a text-to-speech program online, just kind of like typed out this little narrative and chopped it up how I wanted it. The post-processing, I'm using some Little Alter Boy. OTT, we're using Ahi's Radio Vox rack, which is really, really awesome. It gives it that like blown out kind of staticky sound, so like without that.
They say there exists a realm where...
And then with it back on.
They say there exists a realm where disorder and mayhem rule over all.
So yeah, it definitely does a lot for that vocal. And then underneath this main take, I have a duplicated instance of this main track here. All that's happening here is that it is pitched down by 12 semitones. So it's just an octave lower. And I'm using this plugin called Elastic Pitch to kind of accomplish that. I'm just literally dragging down the pitch knob here so that it is a -12 on the semitones. Okay, getting into the breakdown, we have a couple elements that are brand new here. So we have some war drums that come in. So that's just kind of like building up the anticipation for the buildup. We have another Reese that's kind of doing more of like a bass impact type swell. So what's going on here? Different wavetables than the initial intro Reese. But yeah, this is what it sounds like. And in order to get that kind of like wobble effect, what I'm doing is I'm automating the pitch bend as well as the unison on the wavetables. So you can see how that's being automated over time. And then we're just doing different automations of it over here to get a different type of swell. Over here, we're taking some of the main basses that are found in the drop, and I'm kind of like chopping it up in a way where it sounds like it's actually kind of saying Overcast with everything playing. It's really, really cool. So yeah, I don't remember where this came from, just because I do kind of approach sound design from a resampling standpoint. But what's going on here, I'm just EQing out a lot of the lows and the highs, so this is kind of like just a mid-focused sound. We have some shifting going on, so without it. Subtle, but it adds kind of a tonality that I found really nice in there. And we have a very steep peak running into a disperser. Make sure you guys can see that disperser. Some OTT, some distortion. Camel Crusher, actually the interface doesn't work on newer Macs, so this is what we have to work with. But whenever you need to kind of dial anything in with this, you can still select from these presets here, which is what we have to resort to. What else? We've got some Soothe on this guy just to make it a little easier on the ears, some more EQ, and then some stereo shaping as well. Just lightly pushing it out to the sides. Moving on. We've got more of those effects from the intro just kind of carrying over, and then we have a couple new transitional effects. So these are like impact swells and kind of like uprisers that kind of build the tension into the build section. So yeah, definitely picks up energy here. All right, so in the build, we have kick. I used to use kicks that were different from the kicks that I use in the actual drop, and I believe that's what I did here. So we've got some kicks, snare, couple top drums. Got some top loops here. And something that I really like to do in my buildups, just to make it kind of like connect from the intro section to the actual drop, is I'll take one of my main elements from the drop, so like a main bass sound, and I'll apply some filtering and reverb to kind of make that tone present in the buildup. So you'll see what I mean here. So yeah, that's literally just a sound that I have present in the main drop. It is being slowly filtered, and the reverb is starting from pretty full to coming pretty low. You can see that automation here over the course of the buildup. So it sounds like the bass sound is coming from really far away and kind of like pulling you in to the drop. I learned this from Barely Alive. I think they did a stream on YouTube a really long time ago. But yeah, this has been really, really awesome for kind of like gluing cohesion between intro breakdown sections into like the actual drop. And I utilize this in almost all of my tracks. So yeah, we've got a sub riser. And we've got the intro lead that returns just to, again, kind of take elements from the intro section and blend between the bridge of the buildup and the drop. So. And yeah, that's pitching down over time just to give additional tension to the build. We've got those atmospheric elements again present in the intro breakdown areas just to keep things kind of consistent. And here we have some chants, background chants, to also kind of like build some tension. Okay, and then halfway through this buildup, I'm doing something with a tape stop effect. So over here, about halfway through the buildup, I automate this tape stop to stop playing everything inside of this group. It creates a nice gap for everything and kind of resets the energy a little bit. All right, and that is carving out room for this group here where I have some more kind of like glitches just to add a little bit more flavor to the buildup. This is what that sounds like. So a really nice kind of like scraping effect. And then with everything all together, this is what it sounds like. And for this pre-drop here, we have a sub-drop just to kind of like reset all of the tension that's happening in the build-up. Nice and fat sub-drop there. We love that. And the first real pre-drop vocal where the actual whole idea of this song came from. So this vocal is from a game called First Berserker Kazan, and it's insane. Super sick game. Recommend checking it out if you're into any kind of like Souls-like game. Embrace the energy of the blade. Right. So just a super sick, gritty kind of vocal to bring us into the actual drop. Okay, so getting into the drop, I figured I would just kind of play it first and then we could get into what's going on here. So this is what it sounds like. Drop it. No way out. Okay, so yeah, lots of elements happening here. But let's start with the drums. So for the kick, we're using something a little bit different from the build kicks. Back here in the build, we had a more thumpy kind of kick. Right. And then for the drop, we were using something a little tighter, a little bit thicker of a body. And I really like using these types of stompy kicks for my drops just because they provide a lot of really solid low end. Moving on to the snare. It's kind of like a snare clap almost, and I'm using some sends here to kind of do some parallel compression and I believe some reverb as well, just to give it a bit more of a tail. We also have this reverse kick, which I really like using to kind of sweep down into the downbeat. It really makes the start of a new phrase hit a lot harder than it normally would without a reverse kick. And that sounds like this. So yeah, that going into the downbeat of the kick versus without. It just adds a whole lot of swing into the new phrase. All right, and moving on to our kind of like top cymbal layer, I just took a company loop and chopped it up how I liked it. So we kind of have some alternating hits, and what I like to do with my top cymbals is just to shave a little bit off of the fader here just from the beginning of the sample, and that's just to leave some room for the transients of the kick to poke through so that the transients don't get too crazy or muddy. if you stack too many transients on top of each other, it can really be a pain point in your mix. So yeah, I just try to avoid that wherever possible. And you'll see that I do that same principle on my snare or kick clap or whatever you're using as well. All right, now moving on to the bass group. For me, I do a lot of resampling, and it looks like in this project specifically, I almost did all of my basses with resampling in mind. So it's not gonna really be possible to show you like where these sounds exactly came from, but again, I do emphasize a lot on processing my basses in post. So you'll see those processes here, and I'll kind of explain the philosophy of call and response that I use as well. Okay, so starting out, we have 2 bars that I use for fake out. If you don't know what a fake out is, essentially it's a section of your drop where you filter out the low end and the high end of a bass sound so that you kind of pull the energy back out of a drop. And then when the drop fully comes in with all of the elements all together, it just hits so much harder. So yeah, I utilize that here in the first 2 bars of my drop, and it sounds like this. And I'm partnering that with some more effects. We have this kind of chant thing happening in the background. And then we have the drop it vocal that brings everything into the main part of the drop. Okay, so an important thing to kind of note here, most all of dubstep is written with the philosophy of call and response. So you'll have a section of your drop, usually the first section, that acts as the call. So think of it as like a question that you're asking. And the response is the answer to that question. So for me here, this is my call. And then everything else after that point is my response. So you can hear it in practice here. And then this section here is going to be a turnaround point, just basically resetting the phrase back to the call. No way out. And then continuing forward, we have the second call. And then the response carries out. And then for this B section of the drop, I kind of switch up the flow where there's this second sort of call happening after 4 bars. And then this section was the response, and the second turnaround going into the rebuild, so building back up tension for a second drop. All right, so dissecting it a little bit more here. For my calls, I like to keep it relatively simple, where it's just usually a growl, or I really like using spectral basses. But usually I keep these layers pretty minimal and pretty clean so that it sounds like when the response comes in, that everything is more like densely packed and kind of has more impact. So you'll notice for the response section here, which I'll just label here. And I might as well label the call. So for this response, we have a few different layers going on. We have this main bass layer, which was just made with like kind of a growl or chug kind of processing in mind. So pretty vowel-y movements. And what I'm doing here is I'm filtering out all of the lows because we're using a separate sub, which I pretty much use in all of my tunes. But yeah, we're using a separate sub, so I want to make sure all of the basses that are in this kind of red group here, my mid basses, I would call them, that they don't have any low end in them because that's just going to conflict with the sub and make it muddy. All right, so this main layer kind of has a back and forth to it. So each hit has a different tonality, giving it a back and forth kind of movement. And that really helps differentiate kind of like the flow within this response section so that it doesn't sound too samey or stagnant. And for processing on this guy, I'm using Kiloheart's Multipass. This is really, really great. I use Multipass in pretty much all of my sound design. I use it in songwriting sessions. This is probably one of my most used plugins. So yeah, what I'm doing here is I'm taking this mid band and I am frequency shifting it down slightly to give the sound a different tonality overall just in this mid-range section. And then for everything above 3 kilohertz, I'm using this Faturator to kind of give it a nice high-end sizzle. And then in the post effects here, so this distortion is kind of distorting the whole sound as a whole, everything coming out of Multipass. And for that, I'm just driving it a little bit into this saturate node, and I'm doing it at 50%. So it's just kind of light distortion there. And next we have some parallel reverb. I do this to, again, place basses or sounds in a real space. And without this, you can kind of hear how empty this bass will sound. Right, kind of sounds like a little bit hollow or it doesn't really exist in a real space. But by applying this guy, it kind of sounds more like it's placed in an actual space and it has some more character to it. The great thing about Ableton is that you can stack up racks like this. So I have this reverb and I made a duplicate chain of it where there is no reverb, and I'm blending in how much signal of this reverb that I want present. So if I wanted more, I would crank this up. But obviously that's too much, so I'm just blending it. And then I like to EQ out my reverbs so that really it's just affecting this mid-range area. This is called the Abbey Roads technique, where you take out everything below 500 hertz and then everything above 10 kilohertz. And it just kind of nicely applies the reverb to this space here. Moving on, I'm again taking out any lows that may have been reintroduced to the distortion process and reverb process. And then these are just kind of like reverb throws and echoes for transition points. So nothing too crazy there. The next layer is a kind of like support bass that I made. So this is kind of going off at a different interval than the quarter note pattern happening here. So different flow underneath it, and together it kind of gives this nice back and forth kind of like chuggy pattern. It's very subtle, but it is in there. And yeah, there's not much processing on that. Again, just taking out the lows. I'm carving out some space around 1K just so that the main element doesn't have any real competition in that area. And then we are using a frequency shifter to give it a different tone and slightly pushing it out to the sides. The next layer is kind of like a offbeat chug. And yeah, that also, because it's happening every other quarter note, it provides more of that like back and forth kind of like headbangy feel or sensation that we want. And yeah, for the post-processing on this one, it looks like it's, again, you know, taking out the low end, taking out a bit of the high end. I'm frequency shifting it. For this one, I have a pretty gnarly peak running into Disperser. And if you don't know what disperser is, it's essentially an all-pass filter. So it can provide almost like a lasery, zappy texture to whatever frequency point you assign it. And it applies it to specifically this frequency, but it'll affect everything underneath it as well. Really good for getting like those zappy sounds again. But yeah, without these two. Standard chug, pretty cool, but with them. Just has like a little bit more of that like dispersory sound I was looking for in this. Again, we have some OTT. We have an instance of Camel Crusher. All right, moving on. We also have, looks like a bass that is supporting the downbeat. So again, just providing a nice layer to accentuate the downbeat. Same deal, taking out the lows, taking out the highs. It looks like we are frequency shifting. Again, another instance of Camel Crusher, the distortion unit. And then we're re-EQing after the distortion because that will reintroduce some low end back into the sound. And we want to make sure that's nice and clean for the sub coming through. All right. And taking a look at the sub itself, we're using something similar to like a 808 hip hop style sub. Something with a nice pitch envelope. You can hear it kind of like starts at one pitch and then resolves to another one. This is something called a pitch envelope. It really helps with subs to punch through and provides a little bit of movement in the sub as well. And yeah, that is pretty much everything for this first part of the drop. We do also have some layers with some like kind of like reverbed basses and reverse basses. And those are all just providing different textures for turnaround points and variation in the main pattern of the drop. So taking a look at some drop effects here, we have what looks to be offbeat chants. Something I also really like doing in most of my songs, I'll add this instance of crowd noise. And without this auto pan, it just sounds like this. And what that's doing is it's adding a lot of padding in the background or like noise to kind of fill out the drop. So if you ever have issues with your drop feeling empty or hollow, try this or like white noise out. But also something that I like to do is to add auto pan, and then I will usually set it to the rate of whatever pattern my main basses are playing. I also like to set the offset to 180 degrees so that the first pump of the sound starts on the upswing. You'll hear what that sounds like in a sec. But if you have it all the way down at 0, it's going to kind of suck the sound backwards, and it's pulsating at a quarter note rhythm, just pulsing the other way. So with everything set that way, this is what it sounds like. And again, that just pads out everything else that's happening up here, making the drop sound fuller. So again, everything all together. No way. Okay, we have another Reese here that I'm using as a turnaround point. It's literally the same Reese, I believe, that I'm using for the breakdown section, just without a second oscillator. And I am just automating the pitch bend for it. So it does a quick little ramp up, ramp down, bringing you into the B section of this drop. Okay, so over here in this new call section in the B part of the drop, I am using something called Zap, which is a native Ableton instrument here. And essentially, it's just providing a little bit of textural difference underneath all of the basses. And it sounds like this. And I like utilizing these kind of like chirpy sounds to emulate kind of like a Space Laces type of sound. But when it combines with all of these other basses, it kind of provides a nice crunch with everything because it is adding a crisp high layer to all of these like mid-heavy crunchy bass layers. So yeah, those all crunch together very, very nicely. And then from here, we have a couple spectral basses that fill out this call. And lastly, we just have this kind of bass fill that has been stretched to absolute smithereens and pitched around. I am doing some mid-side EQing, some panning, and then just washing out that sound as well so that the transition point kind of sounds like this. All right, and that brings us into the second build, going into the second drop. The second build and the second drop are largely the same. It's just that the main bass elements in that drop kind of are pitched around differently. And there's a slightly different flow with a little bit of a triplet flow. So nothing really too crazy to get into there. I will really quickly go over my group processing for the basses because I feel like that's kind of important to look at. But for the overall bass group, I am gluing the sub and the mids together with Ambassador. This is a plugin from Melda, but it's really, really great for injecting more low end into your sound without Ambassador on. This is what it sounds like. No way out. And with it enabled. No way out. Again, very subtle, but that's what producing kind of is. It's just the small, barely noticeable things that all add up to make a big impact. For the mids group itself, we have my sidechain. I'm just using a utility sidechain, so I'm manually drawing in all of my curves for when I want the basses to duck out to leave room for the kick and the kick clap. And we have some distortion that's just happening when the drop is happening. We have a clipper. So I'm pushing up into the clipper by 2 dBs. Nothing really too crazy. It's just soft clipping happening there. Endless Smile is going to be what I use to automate the basses to go in and out of either the builds or the drop going into the builds. And then we have that fake out rack that we went over at the beginning of the drop, as well as some soothe, just taming those harsh frequencies, making sure that nothing is too piercing for our ears. All right, so that does conclude the breakdown for Blade Dance. I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for all the love and support. I really hope that you got something good out of this, and yeah, I'll catch you next time. Peace.